Hi, my name is Eli Holcombe, and this is my presentation on totalitarianism, authoritarianism, megalomaniacs, and hegemony. My topic is to define and describe each word and give examples of each. What I mean by define each word is I will look up totalitarianism definition in Google and use the definition that pulls up first. Then I will go to DuckDuckGo and do the same thing, then compare the differences. The totalitarianism Wikipedia definition states regimes or political systems control all public behavior and as much private behavior as they can. No elections are held, or if they are, candidates must be approved by the ruling group. Physical force and or arrests and detentions are used on people who protest against the regime. Here you see pictures of Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, Mao Zedong, Benito Mussolini, and Kim Il-sung. All are examples of totalitarian leaders. The DuckDuckGo definition states of relating to, being, or imposing a form of government in which the political authority exercises absolute and centralized control over all aspects of life. The individual is subordinated to the state, and opposing political and cultural expression is suppressed. So I hope you already see the big word change from the Wikipedia definition and the DuckDuckGo definition. The Wikipedia definition states that totalitarianism controls all public and as much private behavior as they can, while the DuckDuckGo definition states that political authority exercises absolute control over all aspects of life. That includes public and private behavior, and even as much as one's own thoughts. My example for totalitarianism is Nigeria in 2021. Recently, a state governor in Nigeria has stated from the second week in September, people will not be allowed to worship in churches and mosques. People will not be allowed to attend parties or receptions, and people will not be allowed to access banking services without showing proof of their vaccination cards. Nigeria is the most totalitarian country in the world today because they are controlling if people can or cannot express their religion or even access their money from a vaccine. Authoritarianism. The Oxford definition states the enforcement or advocacy of strict obedience to authority at the expense of personal freedom. Some of the most authoritarian regimes in the world today are North Korea, Syria, and Chad. Here are the pictures of the leaders in each of these countries. The DuckDuckGo definition states a form of government in which the governing body has absolute or almost absolute control. Typically, this control is maintained by force, and little heed is paid to public opinion or the judicial system. So here, the DuckDuckGo definition and the Oxford or Google definition are a bit more similar than compared to the definitions of totalitarianism. But here, DuckDuckGo adds more to the definition by bringing up the topic of force and the judicial system. My example for authoritarianism is the most authoritarian country in the world, North Korea. The same family has ruled North Korea, known as the Kim dynasty, since 1948. To put in perspective the timeline since this regime has taken over, World War II has just ended 3 years prior. 3 major wars that the U.S. has been involved in began and ended. Those wars being the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the war in Afghanistan. Megalomaniacs. The Google definition states a person who is obsessed with their own power. You may be thinking that a megalomaniac sounds really close to a narcissist. In a sense, they are very similar. Narcissism, however, is more focused on the obsession of appearance rather than the obsession of power. The DuckDuckGo definition states a psychopathological condition characterized by delusional fantasies of wealth, power, or omnipotence. DuckDuckGo again adds more to the definition than just power. They also include wealth and omnipotence. If you don't know what omnipotence means, it basically means that you think you are God. My example for a megalomaniac is Joseph Stalin. When Stalin would go to his party meetings, he would force the audience to applaud for him for long periods of time. Then, only when he wanted them to stop, he would push a buzzer and everyone would stop. Another example is a story. One time, Stalin's son had gotten in trouble at school. Stalin took off his belt and beat him, then asked him, "So you think you're Stalin, eh? Well, you're not Stalin. Even I am not Stalin. Stalin's way up there," pointing upward, implying that Stalin was God. This perfectly fits the definition of omnipotence and a megalomaniac. Hegemony. The Google definition states leadership or dominance, especially by one country or social group over others. Hegemony can be tricky to understand. What it really means is one country or region has influence across the whole world. For example, the American hegemony of today expresses American values and interests affecting the rest of the world. The DuckDuckGo definition states predominance, preponderance, or leadership, specifically headship or control exercised by one state over another or others, as through confederation or conquest, originally applied to such a relation often existing among the states of ancient Greece. As you see, the biggest difference between a Google search definition and a DuckDuckGo definition is that Google leaves out a lot of important information and words omitted from the definition, and it gives a false identity to each definition. For example, the authoritarian definition, Google completely leaves out the word force. My example for hegemony is Europe in the 15th century up until the 20th century. Europe started affecting the world in the Crusades, which was about from 1024 up until the mid 1200s. The Europeans had a demand for exploration and tropical products. They did not have the superior fleet of ships, however, at the time. That was the Chinese. But the Chinese considered that foreigners had nothing to buy. The Portuguese explored the coast of Africa and traded for spices. They even went up to Iceland and Greenland, spreading religious enthusiasm. The Europeans were profitable because they shipped tropical products of other countries, such as sugar and tobacco. This control or influence continued to the 18th century in the 7 Years' War and all the way up into the 20th century when the influence was replaced by the U.S. Unfortunately, the U.S. influence or U.S. hegemony is declining. And as time moves on, we will see who holds the next influence or hegemony. Thank you.